Hi there, and welcome to the Homestead Education Podcast. Do you have a homestead, farm, or just dream of a rural life? This is a show to help you and your kids grow your own food and grow as a person. I'm your host, Kody Hanner. I'm a homesteader, homeschool mama 6, and small town enthusiast. I was raised by an old school rancher and blessed by the grace of God to have been exposed to so much of what rural life has to offer. Join me every week to talk about homesteading, homeschooling, and growth with a homestead education. Hi, everyone. I have Shelby Devore from Farm and Inns today, and she's a multi-generational homesteader with 20 plus years experience of running a successful homestead. She also is an educated agriculturalist with her bachelor's in animal and dairy science and master's in agriculture. She spent several years teaching high school and college and now lives with her husband and 3 kids in Texas. So hi, Shelby.
Hey, super excited to be here today and talk homesteading with you.
Absolutely. I've been really excited to have you on because for years before I even started my podcast and stuff, I was seeing your great summits out there and always was like, I need to check these out.
Yeah, they're so much fun, and it's so crazy how big they've gotten the past couple of years and like how big of a reach, we have, which we knew it was big. We know there's a lot of people that are interested in this lifestyle and what we have to teach, but sometimes we don't realize like how many people are actually attending and showing up and getting stuff out of it. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had my first live webinar recently on how to teach homesteading to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my gosh, I was blown away by how many people showed up. I thought I was like going to be lucky to like be chatting with 5 people.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is. I think just stuff that has happened, especially the past couple of years, like has really opened people's eyes to this lifestyle. And I mean, I might be a little bit biased, but there's so many positives to this lifestyle, right? Like once you know that it's a possibility, it's hard to not get sucked into it. So
Absolutely. I mean, oh man, like I find something new that I know I can learn how to do, and then I'm like, oh, now I need to do the next thing and the next thing. And
yep.
yeah, next thing I know, I haven't slept in 2 years, and
Yeah, it's addictive, right? It's addictive.
It really is.
Which I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about it because I love to learn. And I've talked with a lot of my customers about this. They like to learn also. And I think that's one of the things that's so appealing is there's always something else to do. There's always another skill that you can learn. There's a new like crop you can try in your garden each year, like the possibilities of what you can do are pretty much endless, which makes it super interesting. Like it's not one of those, it's not like a hobby that people take up and 6 months later, like you feel like you've mastered a skill and you're like, well, that was fun, let's on to the next thing. Like there's literally so much stuff that you can do, which keeps it really entertaining.
Oh my gosh, yes. I say that homesteading is just a giant science experiment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because it's all, like you hypothesize what's going to happen and you record it and you observe it and you change it and,
yep.
Rinse, lather, repeat.
100%. And what's funny about that is I feel like I'm living like a giant homestead experiment right now. So I'm originally from West Tennessee and we moved to Texas 2 years ago, and the growing environment completely different. The seasons completely different. And I feel like pretty good about my skill set as far as managing livestock and taking care of the garden. And it has been a bigger adjustment than I was expecting it to be, which has been interesting, right? Because I feel like I'm learning all kinds of stuff every time I try something here. So yeah, it's definitely just a big old experiment right now.
Oh, I feel you completely. I moved from Northern California, where you should theoretically be able to grow anything, and I couldn't grow anything there. And moved to North Idaho, where, I mean, I don't know what you got going on right now, but we had a snowstorm last night. We've got about 5 inches of snow.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, I can grow anything here.
That is insane, first of all, because it's supposed to be 85 degrees here today. It is absolutely gorgeous. Like this morning, I was working away, plugging along on Summit stuff, and I had my window open and I kept thinking, I need to get outside. Like it is gorgeous outside today. But
Oh,
yeah, I'm glad that you're having better luck in Idaho. That's funny though, that a harder growing environment has worked out well for you.
I think it was the heat down there, because I don't feed or water anything unless it like screams that it's dying. So,
Yeah. I had to learn that pretty fast here because in Tennessee it's super humid all the time. It
Mhm.
rains a lot because you get a lot of like that Gulf moisture and stuff that comes in. And here we're lucky if we get like one sprinkling during the growing season. So lots of drip irrigation and like
Yeah.
careful monitoring. We moved in the summer and I had a tower with a bunch of herbs in it when we moved. Never watered them like at all, ever. Like it just hung out off of one of my sidewalks in
Uh-huh.
Tennessee. And I killed it so fast. It would move because I just wasn't in the habit of watering them.
Hmm.
And within a couple of weeks, I mean, they were like bone dry. And I thought, I probably should pay more attention to that now. It's a little bit
Hmm.
different here.
Yeah, well, one of the first things we noticed here is none of the alfalfa fields or barley fields or anything have irrigation.
Yeah.
We just have that much rain and groundwater that
Yeah.
nothing has to be watered. So, I mean, I have to water my garden, but I
Yeah.
mean, if I forget a day, nothing dies, you know?
Yeah, that's how it was in Tennessee. And that's funny. I feel like we totally flip-flopped on our growing environments because I have the issues that you had in California. But yeah, when we moved and we would drive past, like cow pastures and stuff, there were huge irrigators everywhere. And I just remember thinking, that is so insane. Like I've never thought about the fact that there are people that have to water their pastures because it doesn't
Hmm.
rain enough, like that was just something you just had back in Tennessee. You didn't have to worry about it. You didn't have to babysit it. So
I
totally.
actually I toured a organic beef operation in California when I was in college, and they had those big pasture irrigators, and they actually had a cow get killed because it like just laid there while the irrigator rolled over it. It was like
That is that is
natural
the
selection.
ultimate level of not caring.
Like, I guess that's a true like happy cow from California or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Which
That's really
actually,
funny.
this brings up my next topic is I always joke that I'm the black sheep of the homestead world because of my education in agriculture, and I think I found another black sheep.
Yeah. We are definitely a rarity.
Mhm.
I have found that out quickly. Most people in our industry are self-taught, which,
Mhm.
I
Which
mean,
makes
there's,
for really great, fun grassroots stories.
yeah, yeah. Then there's definitely value in teaching yourself. Um, but I also find it interesting when I do have conversations with people that are self-taught. I find that the conversation ends up being a little bit more one-sided with them like, hey, you understand how this stuff works. Why is it, when I do XYZ in my garden, does this make a difference? Or, like when I swap out this feed for this feed, I see different gains in my cattle. Like, why is that? And I find myself answering a lot of questions, which I think gives us a unique perspective, right? Because not only are we like practicing what we preach in our own lifestyle and learning as we grow also, but I think we can understand how things work just at a deeper level, which
Mm.
has so much value that,
It also causes you to go into much deeper rabbit holes.
yeah, it does. I know it really does.
Sometimes I tend to overthink something. I'm like, well, if I use, this fertilizer, and then is this going to happen? And is this going to happen? And then I'm, sitting in a pile of like notes and textbooks and just go put the fertilizer on. Like,
Yeah, just try something. Yeah. I do the same thing too. Because you do have that deeper level of understanding, you get to where you're like almost like nitpicking what your results could be. And sometimes you just have to be like, you know what, we're just gonna try this and see how it goes.
especially the way our farm kind of runs at the moment is because of my online businesses and homeschooling the kids and all those things that I have going on. My husband and teenage boys run the farm mostly. And my
Yeah.
husband doesn't have an ag background. So he's like, I don't know. I fix fences. I put cows in the fence. Like,
Yeah.
that's
I
what I
just do the
do.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, did you make sure they have this? And did you do this? Because if you do this, this is going to happen. And he's like, yeah, no, I didn't do any of that.
Yeah, yeah. That's how my husband is too. So he did FFA in high school, but literally like that was the extent of his
Mhm.
ag experience. Like his parents did not garden. He barely had pets. I mean, like he had a dog as a kid. Like that
Mhm.
was the extent of it. And I was the one that brought all of that to the relationship. And um it's funny, he does help with like everything that I ask him to
Mhm.
help with, but I find myself like being overly specific with him about like make sure that you do this and then you do this, XYZ, you
Mhm.
probably do the same thing. And then afterwards I'm like, so did you get, all of this stuff done? And he's like, oh, I just did, like insert bare minimum that needed to be
Right.
done.
Like
And I'm
the
like,
cow
okay,
the cows are where you wanted them to be. Isn't that enough? And I'm like, no, like you were supposed to
yeah,
run them through the chute and do the worm thing, the worm drench, and
yeah,
before you put them out on the big pasture, because the big pasture hasn't had anyone on it. So I know that it's full of like worm eggs. And he's just like,
yeah,
but they have grass. I'm like, no, that's only, I mean, it's mud season here. That's our
yeah,
pigs and cows all have to be wormed before mud season because it's bad.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
he just can't like that. He can't wrap his brain around that. Like that everything has to happen in a cycle and in order.
Yes, I totally get it. Same, 100% same issues that we
And
have.
I mean,
We have.
yeah, my husband was very similar. He grew up in a farm community, but he grew up in town and he hunted, which, I mean, that's definitely a whole category in this homesteading realm.
Yeah,
But even with that, my dad was a hunting guide, my mom was a taxidermist. So I still had that like way big leap on him in that realm.
yeah, that's
So
funny.
I'm pretty sure he only married me because my dad was a hunting guide. So
We won't tell anybody.
you know what? I married him for his fried chicken. So
Okay, then it works out. It's even. It's even.
right? He fried chicken better than me. I'm like, it's settled. We're married.
Then you can definitely have that job. That's funny. I feel like our husbands would be friends. My husband is the fry cook in our house. I can bake all the things and like cook
Mhm.
meals from scratch. I am not good at frying anything. So that's like 100% my husband's job.
Yep.
And
He
a couple
fries
of
and
years
grills
ago,
and smokes.
yeah, yeah, same. That's what my husband does.
And he doesn't mind doing the sides with it. Like, like he's not one of those husbands that's like, I'm gonna go do steaks, you do everything else, and I'm gonna take the credit. Like, no, he wants to do it all. Like, and so we
Yeah,
just split meals and it's great.
we do the same thing. That's so nice, isn't it? When you
Mhm.
can just sit
Well,
down
and
and
being a
eat a
disabled
meal.
vet, doing a disabled vet, my husband's home all the time. He's a stay-at-home dad. So, and we have the ranch and stuff, but it's like we're both working all day long. It's not just my job. So,
Yeah.
and we have teenagers, so it's definitely not just my job.
We don't have teenagers yet. Our oldest, he just turned 12. And I feel like he's actually going to be easy. Because he's
Nice.
just like my husband, he's like super laid back, nothing bothers him. The two younger are girls, and they take after me. I feel like they have an attitude already, and I'm not looking forward to the teenage years with them. I feel like it's gonna be rough.
I'm
But
going to teenage years with my 14-year-old daughter, but she's abundantly weird, just like me. So, we get along pretty well.
okay, that's good. Good to know.
Yeah. She drives my husband crazy because he doesn't understand the weird. So, you know, we're also a blended family, so we don't have some of those same, like, I don't care if she's weird because she's mine, like
Yeah,
you get a lot
yeah.
of other personalities coming into the family, but we when we got married, he had two boys and I had my twins, and then we've had two together. So
Oh wow. There's a lot going on in your house.
absolutely. But it's been really good. So I had a homeschooler on recently, and she said something that just rang so true for me. And it was that in this very loud space of the internet right now, there's a lot of uh influencers or content creators that are more relatable over reliable.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I know that us, coming from a science background, we have reliable pounded into our heads. However, with this being the modern homestead is a fairly new movement, and there's a lot of new research and things going into it. How do you approach some of these subjects and teach on it?
So I like to say that I'm an open book. And we touched on this a little bit at the beginning of this
Mhm.
episode. The fact that so much of what we do, it's like an experiment, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
Which, as
this
you could hear, I was trying to be careful as to how I said everything.
yeah, yeah. Um, but I mean, there's so much that you have to take into consideration when it comes to homesteading, because in so much of what we do, we're dealing with nature, and nature is not consistent
Mm-mm.
most of the time. I mean, even let's say you and I lived next door to each other, we're still not going to be able to implement the same exact practices, because your soil may be a little bit different than mine. You may have a
I was
slightly different microclimate than
I was going
mine.
to say, bring up a soil map, and you can see that every plot of land
Yeah,
have a different
exactly.
setup.
Exactly. So there's so much room for error. And I think people, they get like this, almost like this dreamy vision of what a homestead should look like and how things should work. And that's not always realistic.
Mhm.
So I think the people that come at it like an open book and say, I tried this, theoretically, it should have worked, but it didn't. Like, let's figure out why, or let's figure out, let's try something different. I think that helps open people's eyes to the fact that, again, we're working with nature. We have to take that into consideration. It's not always a plug and play situation, right? So sometimes and I have to stop and think about this, and you might do the same thing. When you go and you get a formal education in agriculture, you learn a lot of theories, you learn how stuff should work in an ideal situation. And then if an issue comes up, you learn how to troubleshoot it. Well, I think
Absolutely.
what gets skipped over a lot
I
is
realize
the
they can't see me
troubleshooting part.
nodding.
Oh, I talk with my hands a lot.
Yeah,
I'm keeping them down below where you can't see them, but they're
I do
going
too.
crazy.
Yeah. Or
Um,
I point, like I was pointing at my diploma in the background with my pen, and you can't see that.
yeah, I know. I point too. And yeah, nobody can see it. It's fine. Um, so, but yeah, I think that sometimes the troubleshooting factor is what people need. You know, like if
Mhm.
they're trying to do things and it's not working, and you can tell them theory and what should work all the time. But if it's not working for them, again, like they're not going to get anything out of it, which is where it comes back to the whole relatable thing. I think there are people out there that are doing a good job of saying, this is what I tried. And they're like showing you what they're doing, whether it worked or not. And it kind of gives those people an insight into, okay, I had that same issue. I need to try something different too. Or I tried that, it didn't work. I need to try something else. So I think there's a lot of value in trying to be relatable to people and not just showing them pretty flashy end results of what it could be, but actually showing them like the nitty gritty of this is what's actually going on. This is what it could actually look like. So I think that that tends to resonate a little bit better.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest issue I found was a lot of what we did in college and even in practice, like I worked in food plants a lot. It was kind of, there was always variables, but everything was a little bit more of a sterile environment.
Yeah.
And so you had like a little bit more of a constant, like even when we were growing out in our fields in college and stuff, I mean, they would put the implements in to get it to match another field.
Yep.
And then that's what you were working with.
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest thing that I did when I really started this homestead endeavor was kind of almost throw out everything I knew and then started fresh and researched that piece individually to like relearn what I like all the fundamentals I learned in college, but then took my science experiment brain and made it work for what I was doing here because nothing is sterile or the same or
No, not even close. Yeah. And that's really important to recognize is when you learn from kind of a research-based background, one of your goals when you are doing research is to eliminate all of the variables because you're trying to study one at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, when we're actually dealing with nature, there are thousands, millions of variables
Right.
at any given time.
Sorry. Like
You're
inhaled
good.
some coffee and couldn't get it to stop.
Oh no, that's the worst.
All right. I think I'm good.
Okay. So there's so many variables in nature when you're growing in your backyard or you're running cows or sheep or whatever it is that you're trying to do, make cheese, that you can't realistically, because you're not doing this in a lab setting, you're not doing this as a field experiment, right? Like you have to learn how to work with what you've got and work with I'm doing air quotes, unsterile conditions that you have, right? So if you have a pest issue, what are you going to do about it? How can you work around that? If you've got soil mineral deficiencies, how can you work around that and turn it into the best possible situation that you can, just going into it knowing it's not that research lab sterile environment that you were talking about.
So when I was younger, I always had dreamed of working for the USDA. That was That was all I was ever going to do. I was going to be an inspector for the USDA. That was, I don't know. I heard about it, thought it was awesome. All I ever wanted to do.
Like meat inspection or
Mhm. So, or I didn't even really know. I mean, I grew up in ag, but
yeah.
on the rancher end. And I didn't know what exactly, but I mean, the USDA seemed like the highest you could be in the agriculture world. So that's where I wanted to be. I mean, I'm just kind of going on a like a child understanding of it. I had a
Yeah.
friend's sister went into the USDA. Everybody was really proud of her. And so, I majored in animal science, but my focus was food safety. And I actually ended up working in the private sector to get plants ready for USDA inspections and other big inspections like that. And the biggest thing I've found coming back into the homestead world is that they kind of aren't like the end all be all. And I mean, I think that was like a really big transition for me. And the
Yeah.
more I'm learning and the more I'm reading, I don't know, even when I teach on the reliable sources, I always say, like, kind of start with your extension offices and things like that before you go to a blogger, and
Yeah.
then find a blogger who maybe lives in your region, because they are going to have some really great hands-on information, but it's not going to be science-based.
Right.
And then I'm reading this book right now that is like talking about the creation of the USDA. And I'm like mind blown that like not the greatest intentions. Or
Interesting. You're gonna have to share the title of that book with me.
absolutely. And I'm kind of, I mean, there's more to the book, but that's the section I'm in right now. And I'm just like, and I mean, overall, I'm not saying it, the USDA or the land grant colleges are bad or anything, but I kind of had to like step back for a second and be like, should I still be sending people to extension offices for information and stuff? And then
Yeah.
I thought about it and I'm like, your average extension office, person who is trying to teach, they are coming from it. They're kind of, they have that the science on their side, but then they also have your local climates, your local farmers, and they're still going to give probably the best starter information that you're
Yeah.
going to find out there. But that was
I
a
will
big,
say, yeah, I agree with you on that. And I will say that a lot of the people that I talk to that are just starting, they have a new homestead, a new farm, whatever venture they have going on. I send people to extension a lot for the same reasons that you do. They have access to a lot of localized information. And this is especially true for people that want to turn their farm into a profitable venture.
mhm,
They have, market insight that maybe I can't give them. Like
mhm,
I probably don't live in the same county that you live in. I don't know what type of cows your neighbors are raising. I don't know what
right.
value add products need to be added to the market in your area, right? So it's a really good starting place, but I feel like it's a starting place.
Mhm.
There's a lot lacking that people still have to learn and research for themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we were talking about kind of those reliable on the internet. So I'm a huge supporter of 4-H. My kids all do it. I'm a leader of every group that I have time for. Because I wouldn't be the person I am today without this program. I see a lot of other kids that wouldn't be the people they are.
Yeah.
But so I have this homeschool curriculum on, how to learn homestead ag science. And I had someone just massively attacking me online that you don't need this because you can learn it all in 4-H. And I'm like, really?
Yeah. Yeah, that's frustrating. I mean, it's like we talked about a few minutes ago. This
Which,
is,
oh, sorry, one second. For my listeners, 4-H is ran through the extension offices from the land grant colleges, just to kind of clarify we kind of skipped forward in the things we just inherently know.
Yeah. Sorry. So that's frustrating that somebody would like go after you for that, because 4-H is a really good starting point. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel similarly about FFA. So when I was in high school, I did FFA. And when I was teaching agriculture, I ran an FFA program. And I can look back on it and see so many of the kids that I taught, like, took what they learned in the classroom, went and got college degrees in, some sort of agriculture field, and they're doing amazing things. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think they would have necessarily done that if it wasn't for them having that program available to us.
Absolutely.
So I
But I
hate
know
to,
as far as learning like a deep education in it,
oh
I
yeah,
mean, even my kids, we're in a really small county. So some counties have where they can have like 3 levels, like you're doing, swine 1, swine 2, and swine 3. We don't
yeah.
have that in our county. We are a small county and we kind of just truck these kids through to make sure they get to go to fair every year.
Yeah.
It's what we have the availability to do.
And I
So,
think that's really common, because
mhm,
we had the same issue. I mean, most of these kids that are interested in this come from really rural areas,
mhm,
and they may not have all of the resources that, like some of the more populated areas would have,
mhm,
but they can't. And because of that, like you said, they can't learn everything that there is to learn just in their time within the program. Like, I have a master's degree in agriculture. I am, quote unquote, an expert in my field. And I learn new stuff every single day.
oh goodness,
Like,
yes.
there's no way. This is literally a lifestyle that you will never stop learning.
Mhm.
There's always something new to learn. There's always another topic to go into. So
I think that's the best part.
yeah, me too, because I'm just gonna tell you, I'm a nerd and I love to read, I love to learn. I always have. And I think that's part of what attracts me to this so much, is I feel like I could learn something every single day for the rest of my life and never learn everything that there is to know.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. That's so funny. I laughed pretty hard when you said you're a nerd because that's my husband calls me a nerd at least once a day.
Yeah, mine does too.
I'm
Yeah.
so excited about everything.
Yeah.
I'm
Um,
reading and I'm like, I like stop everything. Like, kids, you have to come learn, being homeschoolers, even on the
yeah.
days we're not doing school. Like, I'm like, everybody stop what you're doing. We're reading something.
Yeah, that's actually part of why I decided to start a business online.
Mhm.
So, I was teaching in the classroom, and I was, teaching full time as a high school teacher, part time as a college educator. And you would think by the end of the day, I would be tired of talking about how to raise livestock or how to grow crops in a greenhouse or anything, right? Like, you would think that I would just come home and just be done.
Oh no, you
And
you were sparked.
oh yeah, like, I don't know how many times my husband would come home from work, and this was especially true when I was working on my thesis for my master's degree,
Mhm.
um, which I did a research project on reproductive technologies that are used with livestock and how we can incorporate that into like conservation efforts for endangered species. I absolutely love that field of like reproduction, reproductive nutrition, genetics, livestock, like all the things, right? And so I would come home from teaching, and my husband would come home and I'd be like, oh my gosh, you are not going to believe the piece of research that I read today. Da 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 da. And he's like, what? Like, aren't you tired? Haven't you been talking about this all day? And I'm like, I know, but I haven't told you. You don't know this yet. Look at how cool this is. Look. And I'd be like showing him like graphs and stuff from the research paper. And he's like, okay. And finally one day, this was not long after I finished my master's degree, I found myself with all sorts of free time after I had completed my degree. And I was still like doing a ton of research and stuff, contemplating getting my PhD. And my husband actually said, you are super passionate about this, and I love you, but I feel like you need to share this with somebody other than me.
You need an outlet. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And he was like, I'll listen to you all day long. Like, I think it's interesting, but there's more people out there that would be more interested in it than I am. And I feel like you need to share that with people. So I was like, okay, started a blog, and then it just snowballed into what it is today. But
no, I understand. My husband was diagnosed with liver disease, and we had to change our whole lifestyle. And I was just buried in information, and I needed a place to outlet that and make it a positive thing.
yeah,
It's turned into something completely different now. I've rebranded. I was the Homemade Revelation. Now I'm Homestead Education, and I floundered. I even like stopped the website for a couple of years. I was like, I did a little bit with it, but I was like, this isn't my passion, but there's something like bubbling inside of me, and I needed to figure out what it was. And
yeah.
I've done that, and it's done great for me. And I'm excited every day. Like, I worked till almost 2:00 in this morning, just excited about the next thing I was doing.
I totally like, I can do things for my business and spend literally hours and have no idea how much time has passed.
Right. My
Like,
husband's like, you choose to work this much. I'm like, I'm not working. You sit in your chair and play a game on your phone until 2 a.m. Why can't I do what I want to do? Which
yeah,
is work. I mean,
yeah,
or learn and research. And
yeah. It is the perfect example of the phrase that we probably all heard as a kid: if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Because I don't feel like I work when I'm working,
Mhm.
like I just feel like I am sharing something that I'm super passionate about with other people. And that to me does not feel like work.
So
So
that
no
was
shame.
yeah, I got a little overwhelmed recently with how fast my business took off, and it's just me running it. My daughter does my shipping, but which all that does is destroy my desk. Luckily, you can only see like this much space in my screen because around me is a disaster.
Um, yeah, you can't see the bookshelf over here that is, I know, I get it.
So I picked the part of my day that took up the most time and made me the least happy. And that was just all the operations and customer service and social media.
Yeah,
I don't hate social media, but I want social media to be my checkout, not my job.
yeah,
So I hired a whole team about 6 weeks ago that handles well, we're getting there. So far they've taken over most of my social media. Not to say for those that are listening that this isn't still me. We work together to create my social media, but I'm
yeah,
not having to spend the hours like making all the graphics and getting everything out there and
yeah.
that type of thing, researching hashtags.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize when you have a business like ours, how much bandwidth certain tasks take.
Mhm.
And a lot of things can be handed off to somebody else and it still be you
Mhm.
running the show.
Absolutely. My
We,
husband spent 3 hours trying to find a seller's permit for me
yeah,
yesterday because they're just not like what my business can do, the amount of revenue I can make for my business working myself versus what the time it would take me to sit there and find one little thing or
yeah,
get a YouTube video to upload in rural internet areas. It is so much time and brain power and yeah.
yeah. I totally get it. I hired a lady in September of last year, so roughly 6 months ago. And I handed over, like you said, I sat down and I was like, what do I hate the most? What drains me? What takes up the most time? And what is something that can be handed off, right? Like, obviously, me recording videos with me in it, like that can't be handed off. Like,
No.
I'm the one that's in it, you can't hand that off. But certain things you can. And so I hired somebody to take over customer service. And she actually it's a friend of mine, and she has done so much, not just what I was doing, but she's like taking our customer service. I would say she's changed it now to where it's like a customer experience.
That's nice.
And I know, and that's not something I just didn't have the bandwidth to handle it. Like, I was barely managing what I was managing.
Well,
So
my husband offered to take over my customer service, but nobody wants to hear what he has to say.
yeah, same. So my husband, before I hired Heather, he said something similar. He was like, well, if you don't want to do customer service, why don't you let me do it? And I was like, well, I feel like one of two things is going to happen. Number one, you're going to get frustrated really quickly. Or number two, you're going to get frustrated and then you're going to let people know that you're frustrated in a not very nice way. And that's not
That's a
ideal.
very nice way of saying that because
Yeah.
my husband's a veteran and he would talk to you as such.
Yeah. Yeah. So my husband is he's like protective. And I feel like, sometimes you get customer service like complaints and they're not nice.
Oh no, yeah, there's some not nice ones out there.
Yeah. So,
and I'm very sensitive to that.
I am too. So I just, was like, I feel like you're going to get really mad at some of the stuff that people say because, it's a strange thing about the internet. People feel like they don't have to have a filter when they're talking through a screen. Stuff that people would never say, in person, but it's completely different across the internet. So for those of you listening, if you ever have like a customer complaint with an online business, be kind.
Acknowledge that most of them are either like a one-person show or that their assistant is a lot of times like a friend in your case, who they're going to feel they're invested in their friend's business and they're going to feel as much hurt as the actual person would.
Yeah. And sometimes what we have found, some of the issues we come up with are things that we can't even control. Like, we had a lady, she purchased our membership program and she was not on her device when she did it. She was on her kid's device. And so it automatically filled out her child's email address instead of hers. And so she didn't get any of the content. And she sent us this like super hateful email about how like we were scamming her and all this stuff. And we ended up like literally having to investigate like
what happened.
It took days to figure it out. And it wasn't even anything that was like, it was totally out of our control, so she had gotten this stuff. It just went to her daughter's email, and her daughter was just deleting it. And anyways, it turned into a huge thing.
Goodness.
So
I had one recently where, so teaching homesteading, I mean, it's I can base the content on, say, an 8th grader, the math and the reading level and that type of stuff. But I can't tell if an 8th grader has grown up on a farm or has never seen a cow.
Yeah.
So there's people and so I try to keep it where there's the basic facts of how you feed a cow. And then there's also how you calculate yields on butchering a cow, so that everybody is getting a little bit of everything. And I had a lady recently reach out to me and tell me that I was basically a sick individual for marketing my product to her age child who already knew all that stuff. And I was just, trying to suck people in and take their money. And I was like, I can't teach this to every single person. However, I am next year, I'm going to be doing an advanced science, and, let's keep this ball rolling. Maybe that would be a better product for your child, but I don't understand the name calling on that when, okay, your child is beyond that. That's great. If you'd like to send the product back, I'd be happy to refund your money. It's not a good fit for you. I understand completely,
Yeah.
But
it's frustrating.
It really is. So we're about to the end of our time. I do like to ask everybody what keep growing means to them.
Oh, that's a good question. And I think it fits just with the theme of what we talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be scared to keep trying new things. And there's always something to try. There's always something to learn. And I think that's a really good way to just keep growing as a homesteader, keep experimenting and growing just your skill set. So
I love that. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you and what types of products you have? And
yeah, sure. So my main website is farminence.com. It's a little bit tricky. FARMINENCE.com.
And I'll link all this in the show notes.
Okay, cool. We also host 2 really big online summits each year. The Backyard Vegetable Gardener Summit, which we have one coming up the end of March. And then in October, we do the Homestead Livestock Summit. And those are our 2 big events that we host. We have a ton of courses, guides, digital products that technically you can purchase individually, but we did open a membership program up last year that gives you access to all of that stuff and then some. So if you're interested in that, I would say definitely check out the Garden Farm Thrive Academy, which is found on our Farminence home site.
Just so everyone knows, I purchased one of her courses recently, and it was detailed and beautiful and clean, and awesome. I was really excited to see the content. So make sure you guys get out there and follow Shelby and see what she has to offer. All right. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me today at the Homestead Education, and I hope that I have given you something to think about this week. To help others find me, please comment and leave a review on your favorite podcast player. You can also follow me on Facebook at the Homestead Education and Instagram at Homestead_education. Do you have questions that you would like answered or just want to say hi? Please email me at hello@thehomesteadeducation.com. Until next time, keep growing.